Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, esteemed colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you have been enjoying your day and the various presentations so far. And it is for me a very, very big honor to introduce to you our next distinguished speaker, Dr. Buzz Aldrin, who will be delivering a keynote on cycling pathways to Mars. I believe no introduction for Dr. Aldrin is necessary. I just would like to make a brief summary of his many achievements. Selected by NASA in 1963 in the first group of astronauts, Dr. Aldrin was the first with a doctorate and became known as Dr. Rendezvous. The docking and rendezvous techniques he devised for spacecraft in Earth and lunar orbit became critical to the success of the Gemini and Apollo programs and are still used today. In 1966, on the Gemini 12 orbital mission, Buzz performed the world's first successful spacewalk or extravehicular activity, EVA. During that mission, he also took the first selfie in space. On July 20, 1961, Buzz made his historic Apollo 11 moonwalk, becoming one of the first humans to set foot on another world. In 2011, along with his Apollo 11 roommates Neil Armstrong and Michael Collins, he received the Congressional Gold Medal. In October of 2014, he revamped his Shared Space Foundation to be focused on STEM education, science, technology, engineering, arts and math to ignite the spark and fuel excitement for space in kids. In August 2015, he launched the Buzz Aldrin Space Institute in Florida Tech to promote and develop his vision on a permanent human settlement on the planet Mars. Since retiring from NASA and the US Air Force, Colonel Aldrin calls himself a global statesman for space and has remained a tireless advocate for human space exploration. There is a last point which is not in my paper, but I would like to tell you. It is probably when I was a kid, looking at Buzz Aldrin at space, that I decided to embrace the space career. So, give a very strong applause to Buzz Aldrin.
Not a war up here. Good afternoon. Very nice audience out there. Would you like to hear a lot of details about what we're going to do in space in the next 5, 10, 15, 30 years? That's what I'm here for. I'm not really yet representing the United States government. I hope to be able to one of these days, but presently the restrictions that are put on our representatives by the real space program, which is the United States Congress. They run the space program, not NASA, not the countries. We need to change a few things. I have a number of slides that I will be talking from. Cycling pathways goes way back in the Apollo program. We departed Earth on a free return trajectory, meaning that if something went wrong with the propulsion system, we would swing around the backside of the moon, come back to the Earth. That intrigued me a little bit after coming back from the moon. What would happen if we came back to Earth and then went around the Earth and went back out again? Well, the moon is not going to be there because it's going to move around. But if we time things so that 7.5 or 8 days to the moon, and then put in 2 10-day orbits, we'll go to the moon, be over here, then we'll go out 10 days, we'll be over here, second 10 days, and then we can go out again another 7.5, and lo and behold, the moon is going to be there, so we can swing around. Nobody's done it yet. There have been some studies that go back into the 50s and 60s of different people that proposed missions of this type. Based on this, I felt that one could not come up with a better way of going to land on the moon, because we already had the best way at that time, and it was lunar orbit rendezvous. Instead of a very big spacecraft and a very big rocket that might take 2 Saturn V's, but a clever engineer from Langley, John Hoople, said if we control the weights of the spacecraft and have a capsule spacecraft and a service module, take the crew and come back, burn up the service module. But when we get to the moon, we're going to need a lander. We'll take it along with us. It'll land, leave the descent stage, moon, bring the ascent stage up, rendezvous, and leave the ascent stage and then come back. This was clearly a revolutionary program to quite a few of us. I was still at MIT at the time, and I was waiting to see, in a way, what we would be doing. So I quickly changed some parameters and ran some of my rendezvous trajectories, and they worked just fine around the moon. So I really had little concern. I got involved in the training on different rendezvous techniques. And the plan that I offered to NASA was selected as the method to be used in the Gemini program. And after the successes of that, there was some question about Apollo, but there were a few people that really championed concentric orbits. And so the Apollo program did essentially the same thing. We launch, we do a maneuver called a concentric orbit sequence, which moved us up, and then we did a constant delta height, which let us move underneath the rotated coordinate frame. So we approach like this. Having done that, it appeared to me to see if there were other ways, and I knew that this cycling technique was not really all that red hot for landing people on the moon. We already had the best program, but I felt that this was a reusable way of intercepting the cycler with adventure travel tourist people who could then go around the moon and see the backside, come back and get off, or they could go out past where the moon would have been and look back at the Earth and moon. And there were two of these, and we could build a pretty good program on that. Well, NASA was not interested at that time. So I came back rather discouraged, and a friend of mine who was the head of NASA, Tom Paine, when we went to the moon, said, Buzz, don't get discouraged about this. Why don't you use your gravity assist at the moon and at Earth, instead of cycling back, why don't you use that and go to Mars and back? And I thought that was very difficult. Proved not to be quite so difficult. I will always use concentric ways, but to be kind with you, I'll do it this way. Now, we would be chasing the Gemini spacecraft with Apollo and do maneuvers going around the Earth. Well, what's the difference between the sun and Mars going around and Earth catching up with it? So based on that simplicity, I discovered a way that you could depart Earth, and 5 months later you could swing by Mars and come back and do it again, except to come back and do it again, it took 21 days to come back and make a total of 36 days, which is when the sun, Earth, and Mars line up, and the next time they do that is 26 months later. Now that meant a large velocity going by Mars, and there's an atmosphere there, so we could break down, but when you do the reverse of this cycling orbit, it means 21 days from Earth, then you swing by Mars, you've got 5 months coming back. Well, that's a very high velocity in Mars, and you got to use fuel to intercept the cycling. Well, back in those days, I had convinced myself, not too many others, that a long-range program of 6 people in a lander where you would visit 6, 0, 6, 0, just wasn't very satisfactory. I call that visit. Now, if you go and stay there until someone else comes, now you have 6, 12, 6, 12. Well, that keeps Congress from canceling the program, because you've already got somebody at Mars. But it still is what I call satisfactory. The tours of duty of staying at Mars can be 5 years, 7.5, 10, 12. And I really convinced myself that if we knew what we were doing and did the most that we could do at the moon to learn what we were going to do at Mars, we could prepare Mars and then go to Mars and do things at Mars from orbit to finish the assembly. And at this time, the manager of the Moon Rover program, Spirit and Opportunity, Steve Squires, had been manager of quite a few right from the beginning. Now, it was going to last 90 days or something like that. Spirit got stuck at 5 years, and Opportunity is still working. They were lost about 12 years ago. So analyzing what the two of those did in exploration tracking for 5 years, where for the most part, instructions were sent a day ahead, and they had to be very conservative because they couldn't watch and see what was happening, because everything the rover was doing was experimenting new, and so you don't get to follow, because it's not routine, it's new, changing. And so you have to see how it does in a very conservative program and then send some more instructions. And the reason I'm saying this is because routine operations, like refueling, where you have a lander that you move to a refueling place, you have a depot, and now you're going to move a movable tanker on a particular path that's guided by some terminal guidance. You're going to have cameras on both vehicles, and you're going to be watching them, and you know what the connectors are, what the fill valves are. That's a routine operation, and you can split that up into 20 or whatever segments and do number one. When it gets through number one, turns the green light on. You see the green light at a delay in time, and you tell it to do number two, and you do this. Now we practice it on Earth with the control center and a bunch of TV stations a couple of blocks away and the mock-ups, and we convince ourselves that we've got a good handle on what the segments are, and we improve that to the point where we will know that from orbit around the moon with a second time delay down and back through a set of relays, that we can conduct this segmented routine activity. And we know we can put a 4-second time delay and do it from Earth, where our mission control is, going out and back. All we have to do is throw a 20-minute time delay, or whatever it is, to Mars and back. As long as we've made what is at Mars a very close, segmented, routine activity. Now, this isn't something that just dawns on somebody. We kind of had an ascent stage or a descent stage, but it sort of looks like we would like to have a standard descent stage if it could be very similar at the moon to what it has to be at Mars. Now we're going to have heat protection for the descent at Mars, but because the landers that we're going to make reusable at Mars will be delivering cargo with solar electric propulsion to an orbit. They can deliver it to an Apollo Mars orbit over the landing center. And then they land with the cargo, and the cargo comes off, and remotely we inspect, and after a while we have some refuelable vehicles. Then we send just cargo, and we see that for a while. Pretty soon, we send cyclists to Mars. Now, when I first started this out about 3 years ago, I felt, a lot of people are going to mimic me or make fun of me trying to do a hyperbolic rendezvous. Well, it really isn't so difficult. We just have to launch on time. And for the most part, most in-space maneuvers launch on time, especially if you really make something critical. And the rendezvous, once you start thrusting, ends up fairly straight line, moving in toward the thing you're going to intercept. Now, I'll show you a bit later on, if I don't run out of time, that if we're in orbit, most every mission plan that I've looked at assembles things in orbit. And you're where Mars is, and there's an outgoing asymptote. And I'm going to start burning from orbit, and I'm going to ignite, and I'm going to thrust. Pretty soon I will reach escape velocity. That won't get me to Mars. I have to keep thrusting until I reach Mars velocity. If we use some numbers, if Mars velocity is 100%, then escape velocity may be about 80%. You better not have an engine failure between 80% and 100%. I knew that, but I also knew that people would not like this on time. So when I first started out looking at rendezvous with Purdue University, I used 2, then 3 landers, tied the boosters together with the 3 landers and the crew. So if a booster went wrong, We could jettison the booster and carry on as long as we loaded enough fuel to carry these situations. At least I was preparing for problems within escape and reaching Mars velocity. I didn't think other people were doing that, and I still don't. You'll see a little bit of that later, and I hope maybe you learned a little bit about being in orbit and departing in a cycler that has a very large solar array that's deployed from the core vehicle in 6 boxes at 60 degrees, and then it's deployed. Radiators come from down below. I don't know how this got in here. That was some doodling around. It really didn't mean too much. Now I do want to look a little bit next. Now we've dealt with rovers of sorts, not really like this as we do, but we'll pick up the module off the lander and take it to where it goes. I think there's another drawing after this. It shows the configuration. The configuration of modules on the surface that I first started with was a central module and inflatable was going out. I didn't like inflatables on the surface because you have to mount them this way, whereas cylinders need to be mounted this way. An inflatable, you can only put a port at both ends. So I looked at the triangle, and we could assign different groups of nations to be specializing in those. And after work with Larry Bell, who's an expert on habitats and surface systems, we finally settled on a central module and 6 going around in a hexagonal form. And the central module has 6 ports that connects with each other one. The others have 3 at 30 degrees, 60 degrees apart, and 1 at the other end. And you can do some drawings and see that you can align different alliances of nations who can get to the moon first. Now, we've got to deal with how do we get this cycling pathways to occupy. Now, by occupy, I mean more than a visit. It's to go there and stay some period of time. I think that's all we can count on getting from a commitment from the President by July 20th, 2019, as we build up the 50th anniversary so the public understands what we accomplished 50 years ago and what we think we can accomplish today. Now, you notice I've got a coalition up there. I call it Earth, Moon, Mars. It's the nations who are capable of putting objects and humans in Earth, Moon, and Mars in the near future. And I think it needs a leadership by the U.S. with NASA, and as ESA and Russia have an agreement to work together on the moon, and JAXA and the Chinese National Space Agency. We've been very impressed with what we've seen to date. My objective is to have this organization formed with the desired members, and it will be so attractive in what it progresses to do in the future that I feel anyone who is not part of this will feel like they really want to be a part. Anything that is set out in the way of designs will be approved by the nations, and the designs will be approved and decisions made as to who will make the different spacecraft that are involved. Got complicated and very good. There's a great similarity in the human habitated spacecraft. And NASA has been going for a next step space app. And I've been trying to convince them that the 7 competitors should also look at a next step surface hab together and a next step lander cab. These are the vehicles that the crew will be occupying. And if you have these teams of 4 major habitat builders and the supporters, and they each one of them look at a space hab, surface hab, and a lander cab, you'll see a similarity. I think you'll see a very great similarity between a space hab and a surface hab. My thinking in the beginning was you're going to be controlling from a surface hab the construction and people in the surface hab, and it'd be kind of nice if you were in about the same sort of a vehicle. Now, there's certain reasons why the way that certain contractors are working different projects now in the U.S. that I could see primary efforts to be done in our country. Now, obviously, I can't, or no one can, someone in the U.S. or anyone else that wants to take over the organization of this. I think the members need to get together. Those of us who have decided to join, and I want to do that, I do, right away, and I want to convince our administration that this is a program that starts immediately with the launch of a BA-330, another one, a Bigelow. Those two with the connection can be artificial gravity for a period of time while we wait for the Orion to be available and the Axiom space station that I don't want to see at the ISS. Neither do I want Bigelow there. Eventually, the core module of the cycler will be there. Then we've got 2 BA-330s, a very large circular array with radiators coming down. It's rigid, no moving parts. This is evolutionary to last 30 years as an Earth-Mars cycler, as we evolve this type of spacecraft in its pathways. A low Earth orbit, LEO commercial cycler, the next one that's built by somebody who's partnered, like Alania is partnered with Lockheed. Lockheed has Orion, Solar Systems. There's a logic behind that combination with other nations playing parts. And ATK, of course, works with several companies doing the array. We send the next core stage without anybody in it or attached, and it does an Earth-Moon cycling orbit. And on the swing by of the Earth, we intercept it with a commercial crew or a commercial cargo to demonstrate that we know how to intercept that. Next time we intercept it with an Orion or commercial crew, and now we send it on a cycle or two, but eventually it gets into a lunar polar orbit, where we have 2 relays already. At that point, we can add, in the same way, other lunar cyclers when affordable, to eventually be able to dispatch those for tourism. The supply of crew and cargo to the lunar cycler is done through commercial crew and cargo, as is the LEO cycler. Now, on the far left, we're going Earth to Earth, which means the cycler trajectory has come from Mars, it swings by Earth, it goes up, comes back, it swings by Earth again, and now it goes departing this way. Now, any sane person would be going around this way at the Earth and then intercepted on the outbound leg, as I did, and as I think most everybody would do. But you run into this escape velocity and ultimate velocity, but you don't do that if you enter an ellipse toward the incoming. Then you come back and you reach escape, you can abort, then you reach velocity, where you can still aero brake back and recover at Earth. That is new. Until somebody says, oh, I thought I had that last week or 2 years ago. Oh yeah, show me you did. Now, the cycler coming by Mars this way. Mars is that way, Earth is this way. We're going to deliver things on the blue line. It's going to get off, and Mars is going to aero capture from the cycler. This is the lander cab, not the lander and the cab, just the lander cab, so it needs to aero brake. When it rendezvous with the cargo lander that came in first, and cargo, and the lander now has landed, we've refueled it, and we can now send the lander and the cab to land at the base camp. We've refueled here. If we send cargo initially on landers, then we don't have to send landers anymore, it's just cargo. We can send a return booster. We could refuel it in Mars orbit, and if this is the crew cab coming down here from the aero capture, if we want to go back again, we need the booster and the crew cab to come back here, and it goes around Mars clockwise now, goes out here and does the same intercept to come from Mars back to Earth. I haven't drawn all the pathways. The blue is just the pathway for the arrival. We switch just back to the other one because there's a major. Give me 5 minutes more. Let me dazzle you with some changes that people are going to have to make because of fiscal discipline. And they are changes kind of mandated by reusability. This is the ISS. It's been around for a good while to keep it going, keep it going. We're not going to put anything else in low Earth orbit. We don't. Someone else may want to do that, but then that's duplicating things. If we start something new and don't put anything up there, like the BA330s and like the Axiom, we can put something in between these and simulate the cycler core, which gives us the power. It then becomes a LEO cycle. A commercial crew has been going to this. Notice Orion. It's going to fly EM1. If they can get in the lunar orbit by September 11, 2020, let them do it. But if they can't, they're canceled. from that point on, the SLS and the EUS deliver fuel. And the EUS becomes an EBS, a booster stage, reusable for low Earth orbit or to Mars. We launch fuel and water now into an EUS fuel tanker that's reusable. And it takes, should be water up here, it takes water here to L2. Now with water at L2 and without a nuclear reactor on the moon, we will use solar power here to send fuel to the Apollo orbit and refuel there. Once we have a reactor on the surface, we'll deliver fuel. No, we'll deliver water to the surface, and then the same nuclear reactor will convert that to fuel when we have lunar fuel, no more Earth water. Instead, what we do is send fuel to L2, and that fuel comes down here and is used for payloads from low Earth orbit to Moon and Mars. Now, if you want to refuel at moon distance, you're going to have to send everything out there with Earth fuel. So it's out there, and you assemble it together. You put the crew in there, and you're in radiation while you're doing this. And then you decide to, in small fine print, the journey to Mars says, depart for Mars from a high ellipse. A high ellipse around what? Certainly not the moon. They mean a high ellipse around the Earth, which means you're going to come back and swing by the Earth and head for Mars. That's where you're going to add the delta V. We all know that. You get the most out of fuel and delta V if you apply it when the velocity is high. But now it's heading for Mars, but you have invested Earth fuel in getting it there and coming back. Now, that's a logical way of looking at it, and you can look at it a number of other ways. Let's say you're going to depot out by the moon and Mars, and you've got an outgoing asymptote and the time to go. What's going to tell you that the moon in its 30-day, 27-day orbit is going to be in the right position to leave some there and swing by the Earth and head for Mars? These are a few things that haven't really been thought out in detail yet. I think I've covered how we need to ease out of this and get into this cycler in low Earth orbit at 30 degrees. That's what is very accessible for lunar activities. We're going to have the second cycler unmanned go into the lunar cycler, be intercepted, and the next time we'll put the Orion into it, then the Orion will become a lunar cycler with the cycler. We'll be sending commercial crew to it, up and down, and we'll get the landers, lander and cargo only, and then crew cab. We'll go into the Apollo orbit, and they'll get refueled in this effort with water and the fuel, and eventually the lander and the cargo and the crew cab will land and then go back up in orbit, and it all fits together. And I wish I had a little more time and was a little smoother in describing this, but I am very convinced that there is a flow into this sequence of events, and there is room for great partnership. That's probably the one big reason So we don't just go to the moon, go to Mars. We go to the moon to build partners and use partners. And their desires to want to do that. We've been there, but we also want to learn the refueling. And we also want to learn how you put things together so that when we get a crew to a focused, stabilized orbit, I want you to understand what that means. A DRO is a lunar stabilized orbit. It's kind of useless. It's a 2x1 ellipse going around the moon, 40,000 miles, 50,000, 100. It's not very close and it's not very useful. But you have a focused, stabilized orbit. Toward Mars, it's about 4 kilometers, 10 kilometers ahead, 5 kilometers away from Mars. And it goes around 7.5 hours. With 2 other relays, 3 other relays, just to make Lagrange turn over and is ready. Focused stabilized orbit goes around L1 and L2, so we'll have L3, L4, and L5. Now this is all nominal. What we do at the moon and assembling will determine the correct altitudes that we need. If there's some detailed people that would like to learn a little bit more about this, I'd be happy to communicate some more with you to answer some questions, because I think that this needs a lot of little fine points and little contributions here and there. It's been 30 years, really, that I've been working on this. In the last 3 years, I've been quite active. 2 years have been even more active. The last year, and even the last 6 months, I've been fine-tuning this. And I'm trying to look for most all eventualities. Reusability is the name of the game. And that means standardized. And to me, that means Blue Origin's going to land on the moon first. We better start working with them to help them get reusable landers and come up with a design for cargo. And other people who are planning to do things, we want to work with them, filter them into this. And everybody has an equal vote in this until somebody dictates some kind of a pecking order. I had things written down, but I felt that you needed to know the different aspects of this and how we phase out several things and how everything else fits together and how it does lead to a cycling pathway to occupy. And then in 4, 5, 6 years, when we will convince people of the logic of the economics of not sending people there. That's expensive. Bringing them back, that's expensive. And we've lost 2 years. And we do that again, and you add that up. And pretty soon you come to the conclusion. Why don't you design that into the base in the first place? By finding out something that works on the moon, and then perfect it, and making it work also for you. Obviously, you're not one for burying everything, or building a base with a 3D printer. Maybe that'll come along. I'm an old school person. Anyway, I've enjoyed working my way through this because it gives me practice to deal with other people that I think ought to know these things. So thank you very much for your patience, and when you can relay observations, comments, and certainly like to add everybody's input into this, because I think it has the ingredients to get your ass to Mars. Thank you.